To all who come to this happy place, welcome.
The Blood Family. That's a little dark. During the early days of the Haunted Mansion, Disney couldn't quite agree on what story to give the house. Walt Disney Imagineering, then known as WED, had gone through the idea of the Captain Gore story, I'm sure we're all familiar with, but Imagineer Ken Anderson was coming up with a very different and much darker story. You see, at this point, the Haunted Mansion was not going to be an Omnimover style attraction, it was instead going to be a walkthrough. Guests would not board doom buggies, but would instead journey through the mansion on foot. It would be very similar to what we have today in the stretching room and onwards towards the changing portrait hallway at Disneyland. At Disney World, it's just the stretching room. Once inside the Haunted Mansion, then known as Bloodmere Manor, Walt Disney's voice, seeming to hover above the guests, would talk of the Blood family who lives there. Or I guess it would be better to say lived there because they're all dead. Walt would explain that restoration efforts were taken once the mansion arrived at Disneyland from New Orleans, like the real New Orleans, but when the restoration crew would come in the next morning, all of their work would have been undone the night before. Mysteriously, by something otherworldly. There would be 7 main rooms that guests would walk through that would showcase different effects that we see in the mansion today, like the Pepper's Ghost effect we see in the ballroom and the hitchhiking ghost effect we see towards the end of the attraction. Eventually, the concept for a solid storyline containing characters who lived in the mansion wasn't really needed. The story of the mansion moved towards something we're familiar with now, where the story is kind of left up to us to decide what happened. But various story elements like a wedding taking place in the Bloodmere Manor made it over into the Haunted Mansion that we know today, except it's not really a wedding, but there is a bride. Eventually, the concept of a walk-through Haunted Mansion was also discarded because it would take forever to move guests. It is then Disney turned the Haunted Mansion into a Omnimover style attraction, very similar to Adventure Through Inner Space in Tomorrowland, right down to the Paul Frees. But what about you? Do you think Disney should have kept the idea for a Bloodmere Manor or for a walk-through Haunted Mansion? And thank you all for tuning in to the 31 Nights of the Haunted Mansion. I'll see you all a little later.